Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our live retail insights discussion. We are talking about landing on the right side of tomorrow. 2022, can't believe we're actually saying 2022 at this point, but it is just around the corner. So we wanted to assemble this panel today to really discuss what can be done today, given all of the challenges that we're facing, not only with COVID, but with supply chain, rising inflation. What can retailers do now to really set the stage for success in 2022? And I'm joined by Mark Weiss, CEO of Management One, and Ilsa Metchek, President of California Fashion Association. Thanks for joining us. And Mr. Dane Cohen, our Business Development Manager here at Management One. I am Nico Cabral, Director of Marketing. And before we get to our actual content, I do want to go through a couple of ground rules for the system that we're using here, GoToWebinar. The first one's audio. We want to make sure that you can hear us clearly, so you have the ability to go in and tweak your audio settings right in the GoToWebinar panel there. Choose the audio and microphone that works best for you. If we have time to actually hot your mic at the end, we will do so. But if you do want to ask us a question towards the end, and we certainly encourage that, there is a questions panel where you can type it in, and we will put some live questions out to the panel towards the end there. One of the most popular questions that we get is, are you recording this? We do understand people may have to leave early, and yes, we absolutely are recording this, and we're going to send out a recording to watch again with your team and pull out any notes that you possibly can from this, because we are going to cover a good amount of information in the next 60 minutes. So who is Management One? If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. Management One actually has the task of providing financial security for our people, our clients, and our affiliates. And we do that by focusing on merchandise intelligence and education like this for independent retailers like you. We do this by operating through a core set of values, those being generous heart, courage, curiosity, adaptability, commitment, and collaboration. And the main thing with this company, we've been in business now nearly 35 years. We started off as retailers first, and over the years really developed a unique set of algorithms and software to put forth our ideas and our consulting practice. And what we've delivered over the last 18 months has really set the stage for settings like this here, where we're going over topics that are relevant to independent retailers. One of the most important topics right now is supply chain. So Management One, towards the end of October, we put together a survey not only to our clients, but other retailers, asking them roughly 17 to 18 questions related to how the supply chain has affected their unique business. The independent retailers that were polled have anywhere from 1 to 50 locations. We represent multiple verticals, 70% of that being apparel, footwear, fashion, and we got a good number of responses, about 200, that we're going to use as the framework for this discussion today. We're not going to go over every single chart and graph and question, but afterwards we are going to send you the results from that entire survey, and you can dissect every single question that we went through in your own time and see how it affects your unique business. So that being said, let's pop into the very first question, the most important question that we asked our retailers, and that was, what percentage of your on order landed late in 2021? We had them choose from 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, or just outright canceled by their vendors. So I'm not going to have you squint and look at all of these numbers. We're going to give you the takeaways that we saw in our responses. And the main takeaways here really were that almost 40% of respondents reported that 40% or more of their deliveries were at least 30 days late. Another 27% reported that 40% of their deliveries were 60 days late, and about 15 were 90 or more. One of the interesting takeaways here is 11%, which is not nothing, it's 1 in 9 retailers reported that vendors canceled 20 to 40% of their orders. We also had a field where people were telling us some of the side notes as to how they were able to get success after those orders were canceled or delayed. And many of our respondents reported that some of the better delivery performance from their vendors were used primarily domestic and US suppliers. Not surprising, since they didn't have to worry about all of the boat congestion in our docks. And a lot of them mentioned they would be shifting their buying strategies to focus on goods made in the US or in nearby countries to try to shorten that supply chain down. Now, what I really wanted to talk about with Ilse and Mark and Dane as well, how are people placing orders to account for this in spring? We saw in our survey that 59% are placing heavier orders for spring 2022 in anticipation of those supply difficulties. But what happens now when they're saddled with all of that inventory? I know, Mark, you had some ideas on how doubling down can really be a double-edged sword.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. Yes, talking to a lot of retailers, we discovered that they were taking their key vendors or AA plus vendors and doubling down on their orders to make sure they got shipped, and that they were going to go narrower and deeper, which we've been asking them to do for years anyways. Of course, the reverse of that is that if it doesn't sell well, then you're saddled with a lot of goods. But our feeling is it's worth the risk. I line up with that thinking that it's better to have gotten shipped from your key vendors and then worry and think about how you're going to sell it, because you can't sell out of an empty box. And it's a less of a risk if you're really working with your key vendors. Also, if you're communicating well with your key vendors, then they know that they're more important to you, and they're going to work with you and can assist you in other ways. And I mean, I think those are some things that Ilse can talk about as well. I think that focusing on your key vendors, being important to them being important to you, strengthens a relationship. There were a lot of relationships that developed well in retailers and vendors working with each other through COVID, and we'd like to see that continue post-COVID.
Shall I pop in here?
Please do.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this conversation. It's the end result of everything that we do in design and manufacturing, and you are the people we work for and with. In terms of inventory control, I found something very interesting in the last market, and I viewed it not only in Las Vegas. I took my chances by going to market in Las Vegas and at the Mart in downtown Los Angeles, that yes, the retailers went back to their key vendors because during COVID, they were besieged with online vendors. In other words, the whole news of having showrooms online, virtual showrooms, and they bought from these virtual new lines, new brands. 50% went back. Of the 10 or 12 retailers that I interviewed or talked to personally, 50% on average, for anywhere from 37 to, they went back. They're not using those vendors. They went back to their tried and true vendors. Now, the problem is that the tried and true vendors, and those are the people I deal with, they're getting too safe. My message to them is they're getting too safe. So what will happen is if you go back to your main street vendors, they will give you the same product they gave you pre-COVID. My feeling, this is again opinion, that taking that model of your basic vendor narrow and deep so that you know you're going to get the stuff that you know will sell, but experiment with new looks, experiment with the things that are happening on TikTok and Instagram and the movies and television, and get that in so that you look as if you're current. My concern is that coming out of this, we're not going to look as if we know that the world has changed.
So that's actually a really good segue to the next question, where we asked folks where it was canceled, how did they replace those orders? And 2/3 of our respondents reported that they did replace these later canceled orders with alternative products. So I wanted to put it back to the panel here. Where are you going to find those products? And Mark, I know you wanted to touch on some of our partners that we work with here, because there are options, as Ilse mentioned, there are options if you're looking to experiment.
Right, there are options outside of just going to the market. There's other aggregated marketplaces to look at. Fair um, is has thousands of vendors that they work with, and you can test new vendors there. If it's a new vendor you've never carried before, you have a return opportunity. They give you 60 days to pay, so they've mitigated the risk tremendously for trying new vendors. Swap Retail in the fashion apparel, they keep adding lines, so if you need goods, you can get on Swap Retail and talk to Melody and her team and find goods. And I know that she's also a client and has a retail store, so she's been able to fill a lot of her open to buys through her own network. And then Fitted in the footwear industry, they have online resources from Nike to almost any vendor you want to work with. And these are business to business. These are retailers working with retailers. So if you're part of their network, you're in now with hundreds of other retailers and their vendors structured to find goods for your customers and for yourself, even if it's from one item to filling an open to buy. I think Ilse could probably speak to private labeling better than I can, but I know the conditions, a lot of people stay away from private label because they're concerned about the minimums, but there's collaborations available and there's ways of going about it that are worth looking into and exploring. Nobody knows your customer better than you do. So if you're a good merchant, then building product for your customer is a great way to have both great margin and exclusivity. And invest time in chasing goods. There's aggregated marketplaces. We provide information from Informa and our partners for goods that are available. We have concierge service for our clients. So if you need goods in specific areas, just give us a call and we'll put you in touch with people that can help you find it. And then I also mentioned this, I'll let you talk about it also, but I love this. And, watch TV. So Elsa, why don't you carry on from there?
I am, since I'm of a certain age and I do not watch TikTok. However, I found this very, very interesting statistic. The list of best-selling beauty products on Amazon reads like a roster of products featured on TikTok. According to sales tracking reports, the choices grew an average of 65 to 85% in the month after they were featured in TikTok videos that went viral. So to Mark's point, invest time in chasing goods. Ladies and gentlemen, get off your table and get off your chair and go and see the market, feel it, touch it, and watch TV. Netflix, whatever is going on. We have no magazines anymore. The consumer is not scrolling through Vogue while he or she is sitting in the barbershop or beauty parlor. There are no magazines that tell them what is happening. It's only social media and only media in general. So if the new Pantone shade, by the way, is blue, bright blue, Perry, they call it Perry. You better know that, because that's what they're going to be seeing and that's what they're going to be hearing about, not just from WGSN or the trenders, but it's what people are wearing. I have quoted the statistic that we use, and that is, let me just turn this off. And that is that Squid Games, after this very popular and very nasty show came out, Vans shoes,
white Vans,
was that the white Vans, 7,900% increase in that shoe with Vans. They can't keep it in stock. So yeah, this is what you need to know about. It's not just your customer that you're used to. It's the customer that is growing into your store, because they're not going downtown to Macy's. They're not going to the shopping center. They're going to your store. You better be with it.
And just to jump in here, it's getting to a place where it's so impactful for retailers that a lot of retailers are actually adopting in-store visual merchandising strategies where they put viral products in a little kind of condensed area so that you can know immediately when you walk in. And this runs the gamut from food retailers to clothing retailers to beauty retailers. So if a product is trending or a grouping of products are trending on TikTok or social media, they actually have visually merchandised displays for these viral products. So the impact is real.
I might also add, ask your youngest sales assistant. Ask someone that's working for you that you may never have asked as an expert before. They're not merchants, they're your youngest employees. Ask them what's hot.
Yeah, and I think Mark mentioned it earlier too, is just knowing your audience, knowing your customers. What are they interested in? And finding that influencer market that speaks to that demographic. I mean, we look at millennials and Gen Z, they're only getting older and their purchasing power is getting higher. So it really makes sense to follow what they're following. Even if you don't become an influencer yourself, at least take the time to chase the goods that are being influenced by that market. But I think it speaks to another good point that you guys brought up as well. And when you look at 2022 and your business structure and just how you approach your brand, are you a retailer or are you a merchant? I thought that was a really interesting question that you guys posed. So I wanted you to speak to that a little bit. Mark, did you want to start with that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think that going to give a shout out to Josh Orr, because I think he's really from Streamline Retail. He was really the first person to really talk about that to our clients. And you know, if you think about yourself as a store, then that's all your thinking is going to be about being a store and bringing traffic in the store. If you think about yourself being a brand, then however you present yourself, whether it's in the store or online or digitally, however you're presenting yourself is consistent. And so people have the same comfort level. But when you start to make decisions about your business, you start to think about, you know, yourself as a brand, and that you represent, and that you're important to your community, not necessarily just the vendors you carry. And so you're putting importance, and that goes to your ability to collaborate with other entities, your ability to private label, your ability to do things, because you're selling a brand, not just selling a location to shop.
Which kind of brings us to a new form of messaging for you as a retailer, whether your customer is what we call the silver surge. The silver surge, you know, the above Gen Zs, we don't know the ages anymore, and certainly the baby boomers are now 60. That's a little frightening. But the silver surge, they have the money, and they are on Facebook. They're not on TikTok. So you need to know what your customer is looking at. I mean, who is your customer? If they have gray hair, like some of us do, I mean, I do, but you'll never see it. We don't watch TikTok, but certainly the statistics show that that consumer who is still online is still on Facebook. And I would also say that when I have gone by the windows of the retailers, the independent retailers who are near restaurants and they have not changed their style of window display. It's still a multitude of merchandise on a rack, 10 of the same style, or jeans folded up on a table. It's old news. They really need to look at what is the consumer looking at. The consumer is looking at your windows as if they're looking at a television screen. Don't bore them.
Especially with the declining attention spans that we're seeing with some of the younger demographics. Yeah, you need to constantly shock them with new information. And a brand, you know, go ahead, Mark.
But I think when you think about a brand, you have to, and I think you both made an important argument there, in that people are shopping constantly. I mean, even the seasonality that we used to see isn't what it used to be. I mean, things evened out. People are just shopping all the time. So, the thirst, the hunger, the appetite for newness has never been more overwhelming.
Exactly.
And so I think Dane's going to talk about this a little later, but what we have observed is that, the fresher we can keep the inventory, the more business, the more traction, the more turnover we're getting. We're at the best of times in the history of retail right now because the appetite for new is so strong, which goes back to what Ilsa said earlier, chase goods. You're not going to get hurt.
Right.
And I'm actually going to speak a little bit later. And when we talk about marketing, when you think of a store is static. It has four walls. It has a location. A brand is versatile. It can be anywhere. It can exist on a phone. It can exist in word of mouth discussions. And knowing where to place that brand and how to message your customers, we'll discuss a little bit later. Before we get to that, though, I did want to discuss the other challenge that we're facing here. So we got through, for the most part, COVID, hopefully. We were hit with supply chain issues. Now, all of a sudden, we're seeing rising inflation. And that's something that is going to be very impactful, especially in Q1 2022. So I pulled this chart from Statista. They released this at the end of November, just showing exactly how sharp this inflation curve is, up 6.2% at the end of October. So Mark, I know you had some thoughts of how this is going to impact retailers and what they can do, at least now, to get ahead of this.
Right. I think that, I've already fielded a lot of questions. Our plan's going to reflect a change in open to buy to increase, will demand diminish somewhat. And I think we're in a very fluid situation. And I think that it's, part of what you do is you don't think seasonally, you think weekly. And I think that's the key to going forward. Weekly, you break it down. We'll talk about this later, but look at, start annually and then you break it down to seasonally and then break it down even further. I think the first thing that needs to be done is you need to go through and raise all your IMUs to reflect new prices. So even your current inventory in your current store, go ahead and raise them. I know a lot of our footwear stores, as soon as they got their new prices for spring, they took their entire inventory, increased them. So they're getting a little more margin on the front side. Also, because there's such high demand and scarcity of goods, there's, markdowns haven't really been an issue. So people are buying things at full price as long as it's new and it's fresh and it's interesting and it's exciting. Get rid of underlying inventory very quickly, even if it means taking your first markdown to half. The key is to keep bringing in new goods and where you've got successful initial markups or enough initial markup to cover it. And that'll win the day because you want to keep your cash moving. But I would increase my markups now. Don't wait. And I know in a lot of areas that's already happened, and we haven't seen any fall off of demand because price is not an issue today.
I had that conversation with a few of the vendors this week, and what they're hearing from their retailers is new styles. To your point, Mark, of private label, when they bring in a new label, and it could be private or not so private, but it's new to the store, but it's great for your customer, that's when you raise the prices. Right. It's tough to raise the prices on the basics. It's tough to get the consumer to pay $15 more for the same item from the same vendor, even though it's sold. That may be keeping your margins where they were on your basics. But if it's news, the consumer will pay for it if it's news. I mean,
yeah, I guess I would disagree a little bit. I mean, I think that on basic items, or as this commodity goods, you're probably right, Ilsa, but on a lot of goods, the price increases are happening. People are not going to be surprised by it.
Nobody's surprised, right?
Yeah, the cost of inflation is there. Obviously, you've got to test the market in your own market, the individuality. You can't take a $45 top and charge $60 for it, but you may be able to go to $50. So you've got to kind of figure where the tolerance is and where it's going to be in spring. So so I would just, there's no overarching strategy to anything. Everything has its own layers.
True. There's no strategy to it, right?
But just keep in mind that don't be afraid of initial markup. I know in some of the luxury stores, they've taken higher markups, and it doesn't really matter. If it's something that was 2,500, now it's 2,800, that customer's not going to care. And yet a lot of inventories have to be rebuilt, and they have to be financed. And one way to finance it is through higher initial markups.
And Mark, I wanted you to touch on the tariffs that you saw in one of our clients. There's things that there's pitfalls that people haven't even seen yet that they could see.
Oh yeah, this was a new one. I forgot about it. There was, they bought there's I guess a hot dress line out of Australia. Don't ask me who it is. And they bought it, but there's a minimum that you can ship where you avoid the tariffs, but they didn't. They bought the full line, and DHL was holding the shipment until they paid the $800 in tariffs. So they almost needed to charge a little more for it to cover it if they could. Although I think this is a line that is pretty fair traded. So I think in this case, raising the IMU to cover it wasn't going to happen. But yeah, be careful if you're buying out of Asia, China, or I didn't even know Australia was covered. But there are tariffs that you've got to be exposed to. There's a way to get through those tariffs by making sure that the amount that you're getting shipped at a time falls under the threshold.
It's $900, and it's very tricky. And the duties are changing as we speak. The U.S. Customs and Border, U.S. Customs is making a fortune for the government on apparel. We are their largest apparel, textiles, and footwear, are the largest income producers for U.S. Customs of the United States. So they're going after everybody on that issue.
Well, part of this was a really good article in the Wall Street Journal this past week about inflation, and part of it is, the tariffs that were started that have been maintained. And, it's causing higher prices, but it's also forcing more production here. So there's always trade-offs. Every decision has its consequences. And, we have to navigate through those as best we can.
Yes, it's true. And shipping costs. Let's not forget that the airlines now are full with shipping. Even American Airlines and Delta are taking some planes out of service that were transporting people, emptying out the seats and transporting cargo. It's much more beneficial for them, and they don't have to deal with us getting on and off a plane. So, which is causing some of the problems in transportation, of course. But air shipments are incredibly important because of the container problems in the boats.
Right.
So it's all expensive. It's all what used to be free shipping. It's going to be interesting how your websites, how your online purchasing continues with free shipping back and forth, both ways. That's going to be interesting.
And you're even seeing that with some of the big box stores that aren't even taking goods back. You see that with some of the Amazon and Walmarts. If you refund an item, they just refund the money and you keep the item. They don't even want to deal with the shipping of it back. Obviously, most of our clients, independent retailers, they don't have that luxury. So they're going to have to address how to get the goods back and forth, given the rising costs. So I wanted to also touch on cash flow, because Mark mentioned something that we've been preaching for quite a while now, especially during COVID. And that's really shortening that window. When you're looking at your available cash flow, instead of annually, shrink that window down and start looking weekly. We developed a 12-week cash flow tool. I'd like, Mark, you can explain a little bit more about the actual concept behind the window.
Yeah, I think everyone, it's December, so everybody should be doing their annual budgets for next year. But, looking out over 12 months, it's, one of the things that we found that was extremely useful during COVID that I think is a practice that should be a habit that should be sustained. Even now, it's just looking in 12-week cycles. That way you can make changes based on evidence and based on how things are unfolding. As I said earlier, we're in a very fluid situation. And it's always hard to predict exactly where we can all use our best knowledge based on how we see things happening today. But if you shorten your focus, you can make better, quicker decisions. Obviously, people who've known me a long time have heard me talk about fail fast. I think the 12-week cash flow is just another way that you can fail fast, which means not look to fail, but if you're making a mistake, change it. Well, if you stay on top of it in a shorter window, I know a lot of our retail experts work with their clients and go over the 12-week cash flow. They do it, at least once a month, and oftentimes several times a month. So shorten the window, have your annual budget, but shorten it up, because you want to adjust your purchases, you want to look at your expenses, you want to look at changes, you want to see how it's going to impact your cash flow. Right now, most retailers are sitting on more cash than they've ever had in their lifetime. Enjoy it, but we don't want to burn through all that cash too quickly either. So make sure it's invested in ways that you'll get a good return on investment, and shortening the window allows you to make those decisions and allows you to be more flexible in your decision making.
Yeah, and independent retailers actually have that to their advantage when you compare them to the big box chain stores. That lack of bureaucracy gives them far more agility than any of the big box stores. So you have that ability, as Mark said, to fail fast. If you buy something that doesn't sell and you can get rid of it, take the loss and move on to the next big thing. And that's actually a good segue to our inventory discussion. One of the reasons that we wanted to bring Dane in here, he's not only one of our retail experts, but he also has a really good background in retail as well. So one of the questions that we asked in our supply chain survey was, for those folks that actually did replace product, if orders were delayed or canceled, did it sell well? And 88% reported that the replacement products did sell well. And that really validates the M1 philosophy that if you focus on product classes and not necessarily specific vendors or items, you will find success. Now, there are, of course, exceptions with some of the larger name brands out there, but we mentioned it earlier that chasing product will pay off. So Dane, I wanted to bring you in to really hammer some of the ideas that we've discussed on previous webinars, but I think are going to be very timely in Q1 2022. The first of those being obviously the idea of narrow and deep.
Yeah, and I think we spoke nicely to narrow and deep, and I'll jump back into it in a moment. But I think the most interesting thing right now, and this is anecdotal evidence, and I'm sure Mark and Ilse, you could back this up as well. But the retailers that I'm speaking to now, I really hear, and the biggest thing that I'm kind of getting is I really feel like I need to wrap my arms around data right now, and I can't take this winging it approach. So any kind of clients that are not working with us, that are out there that I'm speaking with, they're looking for solutions to really have a firm understanding about what the numbers are telling them. So, when we talked about narrow and deep and keeping focused on key vendors, this is exactly where you have to have at a baseline, that true understanding of what your sales are telling you. Because right now we're riding on a little bit of this sugar high where things are coming in, there's pent-up demand, there's maybe a low supply out there, so things are selling, but things are going to level out. So having an understanding of where your best performing categories are, what your best performing vendors are. And Nico, we have a great tool, the vendor scorecard, that we can also offer up. So if anyone's interested in that, it just sets you up for success. So really being able to, and Ilse, I love that you spoke about the diversification of how people could get product now, right? Because that was a great, putting those two statistics together, there's diversification of how we could get product, and we're seeing replacement products sell well. So knowing what product categories are performing best for you, and then deepening your buy within those categories and focusing your efforts is really going to help show you the biggest return on investment. So, Nico, I think there was
now if they don't sell and you have to mark down, what's the strategy?
Well, listen, when it comes to sorry, go ahead, Elsie. You want to jump in here?
Well, I was just going to stay on Dane's point for a minute here. On the issue of data analytics, it's great to have another eyeball on the data, because whether you're a designer, a merchant, or a retailer, you fall in love with the product. You bought it, you love it, there's a reason but data there's no sex to a data. And it's always great to have some other eye saying, hey, you bought this, I know you love it, but it's only selling on Tuesdays at 8 o'clock or something like that. I mean, that data needs a very objective analysis. And because three people can look at the same data and take away a different opinion. That's just what I'm seeing, that you need a data analyst who is not in love with the product saying, this is what's going on here. That's just
Absolutely.
what I'm finding in that.
Yeah, I think, Ilse, you and I were talking last week as well, and I know this goes to the previous slide since we're still talking about it, is that, don't have 25 vendors in one category. Have your best 2 or 3 or 4, and
Right.
don't buy the same pant from 6 vendors because you want to be covered. Go deeper into one vendor. I mean, how many you don't need 6 brown pants from 12 people. And yet we see that, and that's how stores get over assorted. They're not important to a vendor. They carry a little from a lot of people. Once they have a small sell through, they have no selection anymore. And it's kind of a little counterintuitive, but it actually doesn't work in your favor. So
Anyway, that you're absolutely right, Mark. In the old days, you bought a group.
Yeah.
You bought a group and a rounder, and you bought a group from this vendor and a group from that vendor, and you wound up with a red turtleneck from each vendor. 3 rounders of red turtlenecks, and that's where data analytics comes in. So.
Yeah, and Ilse, we're lucky enough here at Management One to have an incredible community of our retail experts who are working with our clients to give them that third party perspective and that outside eye to really keep on top of that data and make sure it's being interpreted correctly.
Right.
So when it comes to markdowns, and I know we have a lot to get through, but I think that there's a little almost risk averse with taking markdowns right now because there are concerns about supply. But freshness, as Mark spoke to, is super important, and we want to free up those dollars in certain product categories if they are not performing. So if by January you still have products sitting there and it didn't sell in the height of this demand that is going on, you best believe that product should be marked down right after the holiday season, if not going into the holiday season and getting some mileage out of it, because you want to turn it into cash. And sitting on product that has been sitting in your store for 3+, 4+ months, you're just tying up in the inventory. If it can't sell now in this climate, we may have to just face the reality that it's not going to sell. So inventory turnover, I love, Mark, that you kind of zoomed into the cash flow tool on the 12 weeks. Inventory turnover is probably one of the greatest reflections of how your cash flow is performing. We want to make sure that retailers are looking at this as landing the right goods at the right time and keeping a flow of freshness. If anything, we're probably seeing right now people experiencing higher turnover rates than usual. But going into 2022, if we're looking at the outlook, hopefully we'll see some of these supply chain issues work themselves out. I think you're going to see consumer demand. Elsie says maybe not. But hopefully we'll have, people will get crafty and resourceful into how they're sourcing their product. But I think you're also going to see some consumer demand kind of level back out, as people start returning to the workforce, and we're seeing great unemployment numbers right now. People have maybe gone through some of their savings and are that push of government funded money that was getting pumped in. So, as that demand kind of levels back out, really planning out your business and understanding what needs to land, when it needs to land, in what product categories, that's going to separate the winners from the losers when things start to level back out.
Can I,
Absolutely.
may I throw something into the mix here?
Sure.
And
Please.
that's inventory turnover and markdowns are different for your in-store inventory as well as your online. I am sure all of you who have an online store, whether it's with a shopping cart or you're just showing them what you have and you want them to come in the store, totally different merchandising, totally different sizing, and totally different returns. So when you get returns back from your website sales, what do you do with them? Are you discounting them? Do you take them back at full value? Or is it discounted immediately? Do you put it back in stock? And in this particular time when it's been tried out, I think we have more, it's harder now to make that judgment. But I do think data analytics differentiating in-store versus online will give you an incredible picture of a broad base of customer. You might be
Yeah,
dealing with more customers that you know of. You may have more visions of who they are based on the data that you analyze, what's selling, what's coming back, and what do you do with it in inventory? Where's the markdown? If it's marking down online, it's not necessarily a markdown in store. These are new decisions that retailers have to make.
Well, I think it definitely speaks to communication. Whatever decision you make has to be communicated very clearly to the customer base. So I want to segue into marketing, because 2022 is going to be all about that communication process. And we discussed earlier about thinking of your store as a brand. So in 2020, when people were locked down, they were forced into this digital world. How are you going to expand that in 2022? And what are the options that you have available to you to really widen your digital footprint? One of the things that we've harped on for the last 18 months now is a lot of stores were pushed into the digital realm before they were ready. And now that hopefully they've gotten somewhat comfortable with the baseline, how can they really maximize that digital inventory? And when I say maximize inventory, I'm not talking about putting more products on your website. I'm talking about putting more instances of your brand across not only the internet, but across web applications, across partner websites, the community. How are you going to get your brand out into the digital world? So in 2021, it was just, for many of our retailers, it was just about getting a website and just getting it up and running. Now, how do we get the word out? If you look at, a lot of folks think that pumping a lot of money into SEO is going to really help them win in Google. I wouldn't put a ton of your money into SEO right now. Start with something simple like a Google business profile. Used to be called Google My Business. They recently changed it. That's a good place to start. If you haven't gotten your business set up, and I mean fully, on Google Business Profile, you can include product photos, services, reviews. Getting that up first is going to give you a huge leg up on local search and Google search as well. How are your products viewed on online product catalogs, not just your website? Facebook catalog, Instagram shopping, online products for things like local search directories. There's over 70 of them. Do you even have a business presence on any of them? Every single one of them is an evergreen instance of your brand that will appear on search, and they're aggregate. It's a snowball effect. Email marketing. Everybody has an email system, but as a bonus in 2022, how are you connecting these online catalogs with your email service to start automating some of this personalization, which I'll get to in a little bit. I wanted to touch briefly also on Web 3.0, because when you talk about the next iteration of the internet for your commerce, we're really going to be talking about, first and foremost, new innovations, not only in web selling and mobile apps, but a little further down the line, probably in the next 3 to 5 years, the big buzzword is all about the metaverse. I don't think we're going to see a massive impact in Q1 2022, but it's something to be mindful of. This is a new way of thinking for a lot of people, and you need to start thinking about how your products are going to relay in the metaverse, how your brand is going to relay to this brand new digital environment. That way, in 3 to 5 years, when this becomes mainstream, you're not jumping on the train late. For now, though, go ahead, Elsa.
I was just going to define what the metaverse is, okay, for your retailers, and that is gaming, avatars, virtual reality, all of that is going on, again, with your children or whatever, what they're doing when you don't see them, what they're playing, those avatars are wearing something. And that sticks, that t-shirt, that color, that hairdo, that shoe sticks. That's the metaverse. That means it's beyond the website. So just to define it. And
no, absolutely. And even if you're not
world of gaming is your new fashion magazine is the world of gaming.
And it translates to products right now. It doesn't mean that you have to start building digital shoes for your avatar, but they're translating to products that are in store right now. And if you don't have your head around that universe right now, then you're going to be left behind pretty quickly, even when they start building the infrastructure out.
You know, and just to jump in on this as an actual action step for 2022, as we move forward, you know, there's going to be such advancements, especially now the next wave with crypto payment coming in the probably in the next 3 to 5 years, and something that we'll start seeing. But what we can do today is make sure that we are as up to date as possible with the current technologies, Apple Pay, Google Pay, you know, being able to accept, you know, whether it be Sezzle or Afterpay. I think Sezzle now offers in-store buy now, pay later programming. So there are so
we
many.
are going to get to that too.
Yeah, and there are so many options right now to make it easier for the customer to complete that purchase, whether it be digital or in store. And those little roadblocks can really start adding up. I mean, I know that now my Amazon wallet, my Apple wallet, those are all connected to the big retailers that I shop at, and it makes the checkout process seamless and increases my return to these retailers.
Absolutely. And we are going to touch on that a little bit towards the end here. I did want to mention to folks expanding your social audience. So we're going to talk in a little bit here about first-party data, but third-party data is not going away yet. We talk about website tracking pixels and social tracking. Those are going to be deprecated in the next 12 to 15 months, but they're not gone yet. So with some of this available capital that you have, how are you flexing your ad dollars? Should you be on new platforms like Ilse mentioned, TikTok or Pinterest? Those are things that you need to start slicing a little bit of budget out for, and how you're going to target your audience. What are you going to say to them? What content is really going to be relevant in these ads? Video is absolutely still king right now. If you look at Total Retail put out an article just a couple weeks ago that digital video consumption increased 28%, even at the start of 21. That's after the lockdown pretty much ended. And this is what we talk about when we talk about digital inventory. If you create a video, post it on your website, social media, YouTube, get it out to as many different spots as you possibly can. So I mentioned third party versus first party. The whole buzz around the marketing industry is how third-party data is losing value, and it's probably going to be dead when Google kills their tracking pixel in 2023. So what are you doing in your store now and with your business to leverage first-party data? And that's somebody that third-party data is a tracking pixel that just follows you around without knowing who you are. How are you acquiring the data from your customers, the email addresses, the first names, last names, what products they're buying? How are you leveraging that in your store? Do you have a system in place to segment them based on vendor, based on location, based on when they came in? What personalization are you putting into your marketing that can really target them so that you're hitting their inbox or you're hitting their phone with a message that is relevant to them? One of our key partners that we work with, OneShop, Nick McHenry, developed a piece of software called OneShop, and it's all about storing that data in one centralized spot so that when somebody comes into your store, you have a profile on them. Your associate knows exactly what they're interested in, knows what their size is, knows what they're looking for. What system do you have in place, whether it's that or a CRM? Or I think the time of spreadsheets is probably dead. That's a little inefficient. How are you going to upgrade your clienteling to leverage that first party data? How are you going to acquire that first party data? You have to incentivize. You're not just going to walk in and ask for an email address. So when you're looking for information from them, give them an event to sign up for. Have them sign up for a newsletter, a promo. Loyalty programs are fantastic for first party data. Ask them for a review after they purchase. The other piece is technology. So we talk about emails. That's a bit outdated, and everybody's email inbox is massively inflated right now. So have you looked into SMS marketing? Now that you have this first party data, how are you getting into their phones? If you look at the open rates for SMS versus email, it's staggering, and it's a lot more interesting to them if you're hitting them with a message that is relevant. And the only way you can do that is through personalization and segmentation, but you can't do that unless you have the infrastructure in place. So I think the takeaway for 2022 is really look inward and see how you're using the data that you already have about your customers to deliver relevant messaging to them. QR codes is something, when we talk about blurring the lines between in-store and digital, this is something we harped on during the pandemic as well, but we've only seen an increase since then. You see QR codes everywhere now, and it's really just a way of blurring the lines between the in-store visit and your digital properties. It's again talking about that digital inventory and widening your footprint. How are you going to get people to look at more information if they're in the store, more information that you have on those particular products? And you can use them anywhere. In-store signage, in-package messaging. If there's something on your shelf and you've taken a video of a model actually wearing those clothes, have a QR code where somebody can look on their phone and actually see the product in use. It gives them a lot more interaction with the product, and it also takes a little bit more of their attention away from other things.
Nico, I actually just was in a major denim retailer, and they had a QR code over their best sellers that said, can't find your size, and it took you directly to the website to make the purchase and offered you free shipping on that order. So it was a great QR code integration right into the physical store.
When we're talking omni-channel, QR codes are a perfect vehicle. Payment as well. I mean, some people are offering cashless payment using a QR code. Some people are tapping into, you mentioned all of those payment options, Dane, Venmo accounts. Some people are offering payment options specifically on items just using Venmo. Talking about payments, I did want to go back to what you were saying too, Dane, with buy now, pay later. It got pretty hot in 2021, and all arrows point to it staying hot in 2022. Retail Dive just had an article that indicated a 422% increase in buy now, pay later spending in November 2021 compared to 2019. That's a massive increase. It's mainly an online play now, but Dane, as you mentioned, some of the, I think Sezzle, Afterpay, some of these models are starting to creep into the in-store model. So I think in 2022, the trend that we really need to look at is how are you going to translate that in-store?
Well, and statistically also, the Gen Zs are using this the most.
Absolutely.
And which means you're going to have a lot more, to Mark's group of interest, a lot more people buying luxury goods if they can do buy now, pay later. A lot younger looks in luxury goods because they feel they can afford it. It's questionable whether they can or not. I mean, there's hell to pay at the sixth payment where you're tired of wearing it and you don't want to pay for it. But nevertheless, that is bringing more young people into the luxury business.
Yeah, and payments.com did a survey on that. I have on this slide here, and it revealed that shoppers who use this typically do make more purchases and for higher values than those who paid other ways.
Gen Z doesn't know about layaway, right?
No, well, layaway, you didn't get it until you finished paying for it.
Right.
Exactly.
Very different.
They want the immediate gratification.
They want it now and they want to wear it now. Now, 6 months later, they're tired of it. Will they keep paying for it? That will be the question.
But these services offer a good buffer to the retailer, because then the actual service takes the burden of collecting instead of the retailer itself. So it removes that headache where you're not having to chase for these payments. So Ilse, you talked about returns as well, and that's 100% correct, especially in e-com. The return rate is a lot higher. So how can you get ahead of those problems, especially on your website? One of the things that we're seeing from a marketing perspective, now that you have all of these added tools, whether it's video, social media, how can you get ahead of returns? One of the things is really getting ahead of the problem with communication. Instead of just a textbook from the vendor description of these products, give detailed text descriptions on your website. Really let them know what they're getting into with the products. It's good for your SEO as well. If you're still showing photos of the product laying flat on a table, you need to expand how you're showing the product on your website. Do close-ups of the fabric. Show a model wearing the product. Show a video of a model walking and spinning in the product. It's something you can tie into with a QR code of the product sitting in your store as well. A detailed size chart. If you show a model on your website, tell people the size of the model and the size of the piece of clothing that they're wearing, so it gives them a visual sense of how it could fit for them. I know I use that a lot when I buy online. I look and I see a large, model's relatively my size, I might go with a large. So it's all about how you communicate the product before purchase to help reduce some of those returns that you get online. Also, you can translate that online interest to an in-store purchase. They don't have to purchase online. Get them into the store. Incentivize the buy online, pick up in store service with some kind of a promo offer. Or maybe schedule some kind of a personalized in-store fitting room session just for them, where you can pull products if you have that online profile. If you're really hammering it down with your clienteling, get them in for a personalized session. Designate specific products and lines as available in-store only. So if they're getting FOMO about missing out on a jacket, they have to come in the store and get it and try it on before they can purchase it. There are ways to pull them out and away from their phone and into your store if you communicate them correctly. And we are running short a little bit on time here. I want to save time for questions. So the final handoff I'll give here, when we talk about a brand, leverage that same brand throughout the entire life cycle of the customer, whether it's in-store or e-com. You have to keep your messaging consistent from the first time they see an ad until they're taking that package home or opening that package up at their house if they purchased online. You have to make the last word that they get memorable so that they come back for the return purchase. And I think in 2022, especially for our independent retailers, they have a massive advantage where they can really be present in their local communities. And that brand can become part of the local community. That's something that Amazon and Walmart simply can't do. So strengthening the ties to the local community is an excellent way of building brand credibility in your local community. And with that, I wanted to turn it over to some questions from our panel. The first one actually isn't a question. It is a comment from Beth. She's saying to Ilse, she wanted to thank you for talking about the silver surge. Very much appreciated.
Okay.
Jessica Rush asked, what was the name of the swap group you mentioned? So that was Swap Retail, swapretail.com. Melody Vanderbon and her team developed a piece of software that allows retailers to take from their own inventory products they've already purchased and swap them with another retailer. If it's not selling in your store, that doesn't mean it won't sell in another store. And the network they've built between all of their stores really allows people to shift goods at cost between stores that can actually use it. So swapretail.com has been an excellent service for many retailers, and I urge people to look into that.
Yeah, and Nico, by the way, Forbes just released their top 5 predictions for 2022, and community-based and business-to-business inventory swapping was on that list. So shout out to Swap Retail for sure. That's going to be something that we're really going to see pick up.
And fitted as well. Monte Keller.
Yep.
In footwear.
Missy is asking, is your best recommendation for markdowns a significant markdown, 50%, and an in-store rack? She said she struggles with the clutter, and a sales rack contributes to my small store when I'm really trying to sell full price goods. Any thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I think I think we're in a time where if it hasn't sold and things are selling and popping off you're popping out pretty quickly, I think I would take a stone heavy markdown. I wouldn't wait around for 25 or 30. I go straight to half and get rid of it. Take that money and buy something you can sell. So and then, you know, if you're not in clearance time, it's okay to take markdowns and leave them with the rest of the goods. People find the markdowns, and you know, it doesn't make your store look trashy. When you're in clearance time, then you know, put a rack together. But it depends on the appearance of your store. Either way, and make sure your people are aware of the markdowns that you're taking, so they can feed those to customers. And one thing to do before you take a markdown, this is just an old idea, is just spiff your people first, and you know, pay them to sell non-moving stuff. Try it for a week, and if it doesn't work, then mark it down.
Absolutely.
I always felt like instead of giving the markdown to the customer, give it to my people first and let them earn a little extra money. So, especially during the holidays.
I am finding going into independent retail stores, there's always a markdown rack in the back of the store. I have yet to, in this past year, not see a nice, neat rack in the back of the store. There are some people who go to that rack first. And to have it there is not an inconvenience, and just to keep replacing and refilling it. But there's always a markdown rack.
Yeah, and I think that speaks to what we were talking about with markdowns before. Instead of the blanket, 30% off the entire store markdown.
Right.
Let the data dictate what goes on the rack. And if people want to buy full price with the new goods, they absolutely can. There's always going to be that need for the rack, for sure.
Yeah, and some of our higher end boutiques, they don't want to have a markdown rack in the back of the store until it's clearance time. So I'm just sensitive to different types of stores with different types of needs.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Absolutely.
And we found and you know, this is circumstantial, but over many years, I found that just taking the markdown seems to do the trick if it's significant enough. It's a tool. However you do it, based on your store, the personality of your store.
Dawn is asking, are there apps or other programs you recommend to organize the customer data? So One Shop would be one of them that our clients are using for a main vertical, typically in the menswear, womenswear. It really depends. There are a lot of CRM systems that many retailers use. I would look into which one plays well with your website, which one plays well with your email marketing system. Some folks are still using spreadsheets. I don't think I would go that route. That's pretty inefficient. It depends on how large your store is, but you need something that's plugged into the digital channels that are going to operate best with your e-com and your social media.
Nico, some people are still using notebooks, marble notebooks filled up. But I also think that, a lot of people, there are a lot, get in touch with your POS company. Maybe you don't talk to them that often. They have some advancements or updates or ways that they're grouping clients, or maybe they could suggest, how to condense multiple customer profiles. So, that's also a resource that, sometimes we overlook. The POS companies are there to help. So reach out.
Matt, in terms of planning a business for 2022 and on in the next 5 years, for those retailers who are not tech savvy and are scared to death of all these acronyms and all the data and all the stuff that really is going to be your future, invest in someone who gets it.
Yeah.
It might be someone who's in your team. It might be the youngest associate on the floor, but somebody in your area of you're the merchant, you own the store, you've had it for many, many years, but this tech savvy business is nothing that's been in your left brain at all. And until you get it, I would suggest that's where you invest some extra dollars in having that little bird on your shoulder saying, this is the new technology, I better get with it.
Yeah, that is great advice. I think, for my entire life, I always said if you had good product and you had good people, you'd have a good business. But my goodness, there's so many, the technology side of it, the digital side of it is just as critical. And you've got it, just the way you spend time to prepare for going to market for product, you've got to spend time to invest, as Ilse said, in finding the right person, researching. Management One tries to bring to our community and vet those third-party apps that we believe will benefit our clients, like the ones we mentioned today. But by all means, you've got to take some time, find that young person, or it doesn't have to be just young. I mean, just somebody who gets it, who really. Look at Ilse, look at us. I mean, we're talking about apps, and we're talking about the QRC codes. You know what trained me on them? Having to go to a restaurant and pointing my camera at it, reading the menu. That was the only way I could see the menu. So even my generation is learning to use apps in a way that we didn't, and we probably adjusted to shopping online better than any other generation. So.
Nico, I actually have an important question. I think our community is going to want to know. Ilse, where can we find you on TikTok? Do you have an account? Could we follow you?
Ask my tech person. I'll ask Stacy. I know we have an account on TikTok. I know we have it on Instagram, everywhere. Exactly. I have somebody who does it for me. I don't get it.
Ilse took her own advice.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's good advice. If you don't like it, just find somebody who does. You don't have to do it. You don't have to be, chained to the fence to make things happen. You can find other people who can do it. And there's other communities out there where they share lots of information. Whizbang and Boutique Hub, they're a constant source of great information and ideas where these communities, these collaborative communities have erupted, where people share, the independent retail community has become very collaborative, very transparent, and very open. And instead of hiding things and being so afraid of sharing, people really opened up and shared, and we all benefit from it, So I think it's don't be afraid to join other groups. There's some great communities out there that you should, if you're not in one, find one and join it.
I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways we can get here for this webinar in 2022. If you don't get it, find somebody who does.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to thank all of our panelists here. My apologies to the attendees. We did go a little bit over, but I think the information was relevant, and we wanted to make sure that we got every topic covered. So I wanted to thank Ilse for spending time with us today.
Thank
and
you.
Mark and Dane. Absolutely. Ilse, we did also talk about in 2022 collaborating more with the California Fashion Association, because you do have some great educational portions specifically for independent retailers. So stay tuned for that as well. And I really just wanted to thank our audience today. The independent retail community has been through a lot over the last 18 months, and it's been our pleasure to put together webinars like these. I think, Mark, this is our 31st, I believe. In 2022, we're going to continue to do so, and it wouldn't be possible without all of you. So until 2022, we hope you all have a happy, healthy holiday season with family and friends, and we will see you again in the new year.
We'll see you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh, thanks for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thank you. They're great.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Please go.